Hello, friends. My name is Robert Dean, and I am the minister of the Trumansburg United Methodist Church. We ordinarily do Wednesday studies, either recorded on or released Wednesday, depending on the nature of the week. But this week is a special week, and one of my side hobbies is storytelling and reading stories, especially cultural stories around subjects that are a bit macabre. I actually enjoy both creation stories, creation myths, and old traditional tales. And one of my places of fascination is the stories that come out of Ireland. I'm a big fan of knowing your own heritage, of coming from where you are. And while genetically I am not very Irish, I still very much connect with that culture, that part of myself that comes out of the British Isles. And so one of my favorite stories this time of year is one that is connected to Christian and non-Christian lore, which I thought we could take a listen to the story. And I can play around with my video editing things for the spooky week of Halloween. And we could hear an old story. And then think about how that story inspires us to look at our own scriptures, both where that story might find its roots in our Christian heritage, and also where that story deviates. So one of the great joys of old storytelling is being able to use it as a springboard to think about your life, your situation, your modern times. And so, without further ado, I will now tell you the story of Stingy Jack. Now, please, I invite you to warm yourself up with a warm cup of cocoa or coffee as we hear the story. Once upon a time, there was a man named Jack. And Jack was a very, very shrewd individual. By shrewd, I mean that Jack would be a bit careful in the way he used his words, to the extent that he often got the best out of anyone he could possibly meet. He was shrewd to the point where shrewdness seemed a bit much. But he was also a person who enjoyed his pleasures. And so Jack could often be found at the local tavern, having a drink and taking advantage of those who would fall into his grasp. And so one day, Jack was in the tavern, in the depths of the autumnal season, when the wind was getting cold, when the leaves were falling from the trees, when all was getting dark and dreary in the world, when a man who was not a man came into the tavern. Jack saw this fellow and understood who he was, for you might say that a person recognizes themselves in other people. And Jack knew that it was the great tempter, the great Satan, who was sharing a drink with him. And so he and the devil sat, and they drank, and they drank. And after a while, they started to talk, and they started to share. And the devil said, I've been going to and fro and looking for a soul, but I cannot find a one. And Jack said, well, I've been going to and fro with the soul of mine, just looking for a drink. Say, how about this? You turn yourself into a coin so I can buy one more drink, and when my drink is done, you can take my soul. Well, the devil thought that was a swell idea and turned himself into a coin. But Jack was tricky. Jack was sneaky. Jack knew what he was doing. He grabbed that coin and he put it in his pocket, right next to a silver cross. The devil was in pain and torment and couldn't get free, and begged and pleaded with Jack, let me go, let me go. I don't belong here, let me go, Jack. But Jack understood when he was in a place of power. And so he said to the devil, tell you what, old Satan, I'll let you go, but you must promise me that for 1 year you will not take my soul You will leave me be, and if I die, then I will not enter into hell, but you will leave me alone. So the devil agreed. And he was all in a hurry to get out of there. So Jack laughed and smiled, and all those around frowned. For it's not a good idea to mess with forces far above your station. So a year passes, and autumn comes again after a cold winter, and Jack is hungry. Devil is known better than to go into the bar, but he finds Jack looking up at a tree and says, Jack, I've been waiting for you, Jack. It's time, Jack. I've come to get you. Jack says, well, I never did get that drink. I am hungry. You're still looking for a soul? And Devil says, yes, I am. Well, why don't you climb up and get me a fruit? One last meal. And then I'll go with you peaceably, quietly, to my torment forever. The devil, who is so excited about getting his hands on Jack, says, oh, Jack, fine. And he climbs up the tree. And as soon as he's up the tree, Jack takes out a knife and he carves the symbol in the cross in the bark. The devil tries to climb down, but every time he gets near the cross, he is afraid, he is fearful. He goes, and he's stuck in the tree. And he pleads with Jack to let him go, to help him down, to let him out of this tree. But Jack says, well, I saw what happened when I gave you a year to leave me alone. Let's make it 10. You won't come for me. You won't take me. 10 years until I have to worry about you again. And so the devil agrees. And Jack helps him out of the tree. I would love to say that 10 years pass for dear old Jack, stingy as he was. But instead, Jack dies of natural causes within the 10 years. He goes up to heaven. He goes to St. Peter, and he says to St. Peter, I'm ready to come in. The devil can't hold anything against me. I am all set. Peter says, look at what you've done. Do you really think you can trick your way into heaven? You don't belong here. These kinds of ways of behaving, this stealing, this cheating, this conniving, these aren't things that belong in heaven. Get out. You're not welcome here. So Jack finds his way down to hell and says, I can't go anywhere. You have to let me in. And the devil says, well, no, I don't. I promised you I wouldn't. So you can just go away. Go wherever it is you go when you don't go to heaven or hell. And Jack is forlorn and lost and scared. Because what can Jack do? There's nothing to do. There's no light of heaven. There's no home in hell. There's no place for Jack. And he pleads with the devil. And he says he's sorry. And he asks for any help. Let me in. And the devil says no. But he does do this. He grabs a piece of burning brimstone. Gives it to Jack and says, here, use this to light your way for all of eternity. And Jack doesn't know what to do with it, this burning coal. So he takes the turnip that he has to eat, because apparently Jack was never without turnips. He carves a little face, a little hole in it, and he puts the little piece of brimstone inside. And so on nights when things get dark and dreary and the worlds are dim, you might see a little bit of light pouring out of a turnip. It might just be a child's turnip, or it could be Jack trying to find his way. Forever alone, forever out there in the darkness, just trying to find his way, conniving and cheating and doing all he can just to make his way to someplace he can find a home. It's a creepy story, isn't it? I love the story of Stingy Jack. It's such an interesting one because it's so culturally appropriate. Jack-o'-lanterns are everywhere, and of course if you go to the British Isles, especially in Ireland, pumpkins are not really a thing, but turnips are. And so when we carve jack-o'-lanterns, in many ways, we are retelling the story of Stingy Jack, reminding ourselves from such a distance of the story of this man who connived and stole and drank and cheated himself, not only out of heaven, but out of hell as well. Eternity with nothing to do, nowhere to go, to try to find his way home. It's a frightening idea. And when we look at this story, it's clearly a morality tale, right? Like many fairy tales, it's designed to teach lessons. And as this is coming out of a time that when Christianity has become the dominant force in the British Isles, while there are elements of other stories in here, there's also a distinct connection to Christian mythology and in Christian practice. So there's two things. There's orthodoxy, which is right thinking, which is not really it's kind of a part of the story, but not really. But then there's orthopraxy, which is right action. And this is a story, like most morality tales, about orthopraxy, about acting in right ways, about acting in ways that are godly and good and right, as opposed to doing things that are questionable. Now, in Stingy Jack's story, Jack gets a benefit out of his way of behaving for a while, right? He connives, he steals, he cheats, yes, he drinks, but he uses his ability to connive and deceive others to get a benefit. First he gets a year from the devil, then he gets 10 years. And for a while it seems to be going his way. I mean, Jack is drinking and lost, and we have no idea what the devil is doing there in the tavern, but he's certainly sniffing around Jack. There's a scent of something. So for a while, Jack benefits from this. But in the long run, all the short-term conniving, all the short-term stealing, all the short-term actions that Jack does, it really gets him nowhere. This idea that you can connive your way into something good, this is an idea that is found throughout the wisdom literature of the Hebrew Scriptures. In particular, it tends to point out the fact that this never works. From the very first psalm, there are stories of the wicked and the righteous. And the wicked may seem to benefit for a day, but they are blown away like chaff. Because despite all of their short-term benefits, they never get anywhere in the Psalms. Ecclesiastes puts a little different spin on things. In Ecclesiastes, all people are eventually going somewhere. If you look at the tradition of how the Hebrew understanding of the afterlife worked, for a long time there was an idea of Sheol, or an afterlife where people went away from God, away from life. And for many people it was dread, and this idea of Sheol is found within the Psalms over and over again. But until Christianity and other resurrection sects of Judaism start speaking around the time of Christ, until those things occur, there's really kind of this predominant understanding of the afterlife as being one of separation. Now the idea of the eternal soul has been noted by several people, and especially we're reading against the grain, uncommon wisdom in Ecclesiastes, by Ray Waddle, I believe. He points out the fact that for many years this idea of Sheol is the predominant understanding. And so whether you're wicked or bad in Ecclesiastes, it doesn't matter. You're still going to pass away. So what is Jack doing here except for delaying the inevitable? It's not like deceiving the devil will allow him to escape death. In the eyes of Ecclesiastes, death is coming. In the eyes of Psalms, this kind of conniving isn't going to get him anywhere. Because even if the righteous last forever and are held in God's hand in a resurrection ideal, or even if they pass in the eyes of Ecclesiastes, in either case, Jack acted so wickedly. Not only is he going to Sheol in the traditional understanding, but he's also putting himself in a place where even if there is this resurrection of the good and righteous, he is going to be held out. And this goes on to the next idea, that when Jack does die, without the devil's interference. He goes to heaven and he tries to get in, but he can't because he's unsavory in many ways. It goes back to this right action. Again, like I said, this is a morality tale going back to the understanding of how we behave. And so for a good portion of the New Testament, it's said over and over again that what we do matters. The way we act matters. Yes, there are understandings of faith and resurrection and about the work of Jesus, and that is all entirely accurate. But there's also this understanding throughout the parables, throughout the teachings of Christ, that the way we behave has a distinct purpose and understanding. In Matthew, John the Baptist comes, and as part of his revelation of Christ over time, he talks about how the axe is at the foot of the trees, the wicked trees, and they're going to be cut down. And indeed, in Matthew 7, Christ teaches that a good tree is known for its good fruit, a bad tree for its bad fruit. If there is a bad tree, then it is going to be cut down. It's good for nothing else but the fire. And when we look at unsavory figures like Stingy Jack, we see someone who may have been conniving and shrewd, even careful with the way he acted. The reality is that he's not being a very good person in all this. This isn't how things are supposed to go. This isn't how life is supposed to be lived. So he doesn't make his way into heaven because he's trying to earn it through conniving the devil and forcing him not to let him in. But that's not how heaven works. Heaven is an act of a gift. It can't be connived away from the devil. And so Jack's misunderstanding causes him to be kept out of heaven. And what are we supposed to learn from this? I think basically that this shortcut doesn't work. Yeah, you may deceive the devil for a moment. Yeah, you may deceive the wicked, the evil around you. But the reality is it's not going to actually get you anywhere. Not in the long run. There's a natural order of things. And that's what Jack finds when he's wandering around with this little piece of brimstone. That there are ways that things are supposed to work. Jack tries to exclude himself from negative to get the positive, but that's really not how these things work. Not in reality. Now, as we look at Matthew 25, a later portion, we see Jesus teach that there are the sheep and the goats that are divided out at the end of time. There are those who are on the good side of things. There are those who are on the bad. There's a natural order that's supposed to be this way. And Jack violates this order. So he finds no home. We often find it strange, I think, in hindsight, that Jack would want to get into hell. But the option is, either go there and be with others or be by himself forever, wandering from place to place to place. That is no place that anyone wants to be. But there's an interesting point here, and we can look at our perspective. And that is the value of light. Because you'll notice that Jack is not going to get into heaven. And Jack is not going to get into hell. But even in the midst of all that sorrow and loss and grief from being alone, Jack is not left in the darkness. Jack is given something to light his way. And the reality is that those of us who spend enough time in the scriptures probably immediately think light, Jesus. That's a connection clearly made by John. But the question becomes, is this a place for someone like Jack? John 3:16-18 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Those who believe in him are not condemned, but those who do not believe are condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of the only Son of God." So Jack is wandering around with light. And the question becomes, will Jack ever come to a point where he believes? That he actually understands what he's done wrong, what he's lost, what he's missing. If he's going around wandering around with this little bit of light, trying to find his way, and he never stops to think about what he's done, where he's gone, or where he should have put his faith, then he will wander forever. Which is the question for us as we listen to such stories. Where does our trust lie? Is it in trying to be just good enough that we can connive the devil into not having things go wrong? Or are we putting our trust in God? Is life about avoiding the negative to the extent that you even try to connive the devil? Or is life about something deeper, something more meaningful than just getting away with things? So I hope that gives you some food for thought as you see jack-o'-lanterns burning, jack-o'-lanterns. I hope you understand the origin of that story, and you also stop to think about where your trust lies, where your hope lies, where your eternity may lie. So I invite you to be safe this Halloween. We will be worshiping Halloween morning here at the church. We hope you join us. We will be having All Saints celebration the Sunday following, November 7th. We do hope that you have a safe Halloween, that you're careful. And yes, while candy may rot your teeth, it won't rot your soul. We hope you enjoy your candy, and we do hope that when all the fun is said and done, that you find your way into some deep thoughts about the nature of life, death, and life after death. Take care, my friends. Bye.